Hi everyone, I'm Michael,
And I'm Erin,
and you're watching.
the early show.
Ta-da! Here we are in our magical
Hello.
world.
We made it. We're
Hi
back.
Erin.
Hello, Michael. I very much like your pastel look today.
Why, thank you. This is my soft butch look.
It's very fetching. I love it.
I like your soft butch look.
Oh, thank you. I go for it every
It
day.
looks like lesbian Sunday to me.
It's very true. It's the new hairstyle I'm rocking.
Lesbian Sunday, hair by Jan. Today's episode is Erin's hotspot.
Aaron's hotspot. That's right. Michael gets to be the guest in my hotspot.
Yeah, it's nice to have somebody else make the decisions. This isn't the decision I would have picked because I'm not that fascinating, but it gives me a reason to talk. So,
Yeah, well, I have this deep love of a lot of the stuff that I do with Inspired Word Cafe, where we bring on amazing artists, but I really love interviewing them slash engaging with them, and I always find that the audience really loves that too. So I hope that all of your wonderful viewers who have heard all these great stories will get to hear you answer some questions and share some work and
God knows they
all.
don't know anything about me, so it's good to give some behind the scenes.
Well, I think they know the constructed version of Michael. Hey?
Did you slip me a roofie so I'll tell the truth?
Listen, we've been working on this. This is a secret therapy session, and we're gonna dive deep today, Michael.
Okay,
All
I
right.
can take at least 9 inches, I know that for sure.
Well, I'm glad because I got nine coming right at you.
Okay, first inch.
Okay, first inch. We're going to play a game to warm it up, and then we'll have you read a couple of your lovely poems, maybe share something of somebody else's, and then we'll wrap with a little interview. How does that sound?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, sounds good. Okay,
So
so
the
our game
game is
is Have You Ever?
Have you ever?
Have you ever? And I guess normally this would be a drinking game, but since you don't drink, it'll just be
Ice cream shots.
yes, that would be amazing. Sugar shots.
Sugar shots.
I'm the same. I actually don't really drink either because my body hates it so much. So I'm with you. Sugar shots all the way. Okay, here we go. Have you ever? Have you ever laughed so hard you peed your pants?
I don't think so.
No?
No. I
Well,
have
that's
great. I can take well, I know this for a fact, an 18-hour flight to Asia and not pee.
wow.
Because
You're a camel.
I'm a camel.
That's amazing.
People get up
I
in the middle of the night to pee. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a great pelvic floor. Now I don't. I can't even sneeze without peeing, so that's fine.
Have you ever sneezed and peed yourself?
Yeah, daily. I wish I was kidding. Okay.
Well, this is actually interviewing you, not me.
Sometimes I say too much information when I'm around you, Michael.
Never ask a question you refuse to answer yourself.
Oh,
I get into that problem so many times.
yeah. And then you feel compelled to answer because you know that your answer is juicy.
My answer's better. Oh yeah, I licked it up and ate it and then I threw up all over this mouth.
Okay, have you ever tried to discreetly pick a wedgie in public?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
are you a wedgie picker?
One time I tried it in the classroom. I don't know if I was successful. It's so distracting when you're lecturing.
Yeah,
Like, what the
no.
hell do you do? It's like, get out of there. I'm trying to concentrate.
And your underwear become your too close buddy, and you're like, that's enough. We
Yeah.
are talking about metaphor right now.
This is getting sexual. Cut it out.
Okay, have you ever ridden a mechanical bull?
Uh, I want to say yes, but I don't know if that's true. I think I did it when I was drunk in Calgary 24 years ago.
Sounds about right.
It went slow. It does, right? It sounds plausible. But maybe I've just seen so many comedy shows in the country bar
Yeah,
that I think I was on the bull too.
yeah. I don't think I've ever been on one, which is crazy because I grew up on the prairies until I was 13, but no.
I think I'd be pretty good at it.
Yeah. I'd like to think I would as well, but man, people really suck at them when you see it, so maybe it's harder than it looks.
Well, this is it.
Okay, have you ever fake cried to get what you want?
Oh, yes, all the time.
Like still now as an adult?
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding?
Really?
Oh,
So can't
God,
you
yes.
can you cry on command?
Well, fake cry. Maybe this is a masculine answer. Maybe this is like, learned behavior. But I can control whether I release the feeling or not. So,
Right.
like, I could tell a story, and if I want to manipulate the audience a little, I can let the emotion rise out of me and get verklempt.
Right.
And so it's like I permit myself to be emotional. I'm not really
Right.
feeling it, but I can find where it is within me.
Right.
So that feels fake because I've chosen to
Yeah.
find the feeling in my
Yeah.
body.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't use it for nasty purposes. I'm not like,
No.
oh, I really need that birthday gift. Could you just buy it for me? I want that. Whatever. I use it mostly as a performative tool.
Yeah, right. Which I think probably would also be the same for me. And that maybe also it happens like subconsciously too, like you said, where you're falling into the moment of performing and suddenly it's like, I know what could really set this off.
Yeah, I know how to make this.
Yeah. Couple tears, we got them. We
Yeah.
got them right where we want them.
Yeah. I know how to
Okay.
make this faculty meeting go my way. I just want to acknowledge the emotional labor of this moment. I've actually said that.
Have you?
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. I'm always trying to humanize the institution.
Yeah, and that has got to be an undertaking in and of itself.
Yeah, well, it's not hard to be a human in the institution if you're a human.
Right.
There's just a lot of robots in there.
Yeah.
Or there are a lot of people trying to be professional. And I
Yeah.
have no interest in that, in the idea of, well, the professional,
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
supposed, that means somehow professional means detached.
Yeah. No, I agree. Actually, after my thesis defense, which I, cried so hard at snot, like, remember that dripped out of my nose and landed on the ground.
I do not remember that.
And I told somebody, like one of other professors in the program who I won't name, but her response was sort of, "You cried? Oh, like that was like she suddenly felt bad for me that I had cried at my thesis defense, and my response was, yeah, it was great. It was a beautiful, really vulnerable, incredible moment for me, and I don't imagine it could have gone any other way. And also, Michael was staring right at me, so I had.
Well, I had a thesis defense last month, and it was on video, and two of the people on the committee were crying.
Wow.
Matt and we were both crying.
Yeah.
I saw him wipe tears away from his eyes, and I was like, oh, thank Christ I'm not the only one.
Yeah. It's good. I think it's really good, and especially like you said in those moments of where we seek professionalism as like a lack of emotions when emotions are not unprofessional.
Well,
know?
and our currency in being writers and creative people in that academy, our currency is human emotion. Like,
Yeah.
that's what you're trying to instill and inspire and draw out of other people, is like emotional connection.
Yeah.
It's not intellect, like,
No.
really.
No.
Sure, some of that is, but the big currency, the big dollar is, well, I hate that, but the big electricity is, I didn't like that metaphor. The big electricity is emotion. And so
Yeah.
why I need to model that for my creative writing students. I need
Yeah.
to model a kind of vulnerability if I'm going to ask them to be vulnerable too.
Yeah.
And I think anything less is sort of
Artifice.
It's ethically bankrupt.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
I have big opinions about this.
Yeah, clearly.
Anyways, what's the next
Who
question?
knew
'Cause
this was such an intense game of Have You Ever?
I'll just talk forever.
Okay, here we go. Last one. Have you ever stolen from a store?
Yes, by accident.
Oh,
When I was 6 or 7, we went to Canadian Tire or something like that, and I was buying those streamers that go on the handlebars of your bike,
yep.
and I forgot to put them on the conveyor belt to get charged, and we walked out of the store, and I was insisting on holding them. That's why I had them. And when
Yeah.
we walked out of the store, I showed, oh, I must have been younger than 6. I was probably 4 or 5. When I walked out, I showed my mom. I went, Mom, we didn't pay for these. She's like, just put them in the bag. Put them in the bag. I'm not going back in. It's too embarrassing. And my sister says she didn't know that we were poor. I was like, yeah, my mom encouraged me to steal.
She's like, good job, Mikey. Good job.
What else you got? You got things in your pockets? I'm going to sew you some big pockets on those jeans for next week.
Yeah, you just hold on to all the things that Mummy can't fit in the cart.
She was just too mortified. But that's probably the only thing I've stolen other than, like, office supplies where you take pens home or something.
Right.
Who doesn't do that's not stealing.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's pretty impressive, though.
Oh, I'm such a goody two-shoes.
Yeah, you don't want to break the rules.
No.
Some rules.
I'll break all kinds of sex rules.
There we go.
You're not allowed to have sex there. Watch me. Yeah, whatever.
Okay, now
Okay.
it would be so wonderful if on this version of Erin's Hotspot, you would share some of your lovely writing with us.
Okay, so we said that you had asked me to share a poem, so I'm going to pick this. I haven't shared a poem from this particular person. Oh,
Okay.
hey, where'd you go? Oh, I hate that. This is Stephen Dobbins. He is an American writer. He is best known probably for being a murder mystery writer, but he's also I know him as a poet, and then I found out he sells a lot of murder mystery books.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of his poems are they're like little parables.
Okay,
And
cool.
I just found this one randomly in the last minute, and it's kind of amazing how much of an echo there is to the moment. It's called Arrested Saturday Night. This is how it happened. Peg and Bob had invited Jack and Roxanne over to their house to watch the TV, and on the big screen they saw Peg and Bob, Jack and Roxanne, watch themselves on progressively smaller TVs. Outside, it was autumn. Strips of cloud brushed the moon. Also, outside, a prowler stood under the big maple in the front yard, and he didn't see the moon, nor hear formations of geese crossing the night sky. Instead, he watched Peg and Bob and their guests watch themselves on the TV. And also outside, in a white Pontiac parked at the curb, the policeman didn't feel winter approaching, nor smell smoke from where kids had burned leaves for quarters. Instead, he watched the prowler watch the people watching themselves on the TV, and he saw all this through the big front window of his big car, itself a kind of screen, which I can easily swear to, since I saw everything through the picture window of my house across the street. And I was kicking the wall and hammering on the glass, not because my Doberman had gone rabid, nor because my air conditioner was pumping out yellow smoke, nor because I believe that television is the closest mechanical approximation of death available to man. No, I was hammering because the audio was broken on my picture window, and with all that silence and useless staring, well, shit, I'd had it up to here. Arrested Saturday Night.
Wow, that's a great poem.
Stephen Dobbins, Dobyns. Stephen Dobbins is a goddamn genius.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never heard of him, so I'll have to definitely check him out. I love the narrative voice in that piece.
Do we want... Is this
beautiful.
terrible? Do we want... I wonder if I can find it. No, it's fine. That's fine. So I'm just going to do one little poem of mine because I've done a bunch of
Sure.
poems and who cares? And I kind of feel weird that it's Hotspot and it's about me because
Good. I'm glad I've managed to make the queen herself uncomfortable.
it's so strange, right? I had to talk myself into doing this show. I had the idea like in the last year in the summer. I thought maybe in 2020 in the first week of January I'll do a weekly storytelling show.
Right.
And the whole fall I talked about it with people. I sort of thought through it and then the time came and went and I didn't do it because I thought to myself, who the fuck wants to listen to me? Like
Yeah.
why do I want to take up more space in the world?
Yeah.
Who's gonna care? It's so weird
Yeah.
because anyway, it's weird to I have had such a history of feeling like I wasn't entitled to space that I have to convince myself to make things. I love making things. It's easy to make things,
Yeah.
but then sharing them. Sometimes I think, "Oh yeah, like writing and making stuff and leaving it at home." I'm such a people person though. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't do the Salinger thing and go away in the woods because I want to talk to people.
Yeah.
Anyways, um uh so that was Dobbins, and here's this little poem called I Dream a Queer Allegory. And the thing I like about Dobbins is how narrative the work is and how kind of surreal. Like, there's
Hmm.
also an element of it that you don't quite understand. It is
Yeah.
dreamlike, that way a parable allows.
Totally.
Yeah,
While being very like Americana, which I
yeah,
love about it, right? It places you in this century, but exactly, it doesn't quite feel right.
yeah. It doesn't quite feel right. So here's a version of my version of that. I Dream a
Awesome.
Queer Allegory. Check this. We're in a house deep in the woods. I'm trying to talk a committee sized group, maybe 5, into having sex. Nobody's going for it, despite wild times before. Maybe desire is dead? A dark haired, stocky guy in a short sleeved cowboy shirt is talking politics I admire. He's decided to be at a particular place to protest American policy when it's enacted. The actions of a female, I think, like Madeleine Albright. This guy misuses the word randomize. I randomized my choice of location. I'm getting nowhere with the sex thing. As I move my position to address the group, I notice, speeding between the trees, a gray car, a huge early model American, a stripped down 62 Pontiac my dad used to drive, carrying a man to murder us. I run to the woods. I know everybody else will die. He's coming so fast. The only thing I can imagine is to throw my body to the floor of the woods, hoping he won't notice me, and wait for night to fall. Soon I will be a corpse. A voiceover, like a horror movie trailer, whispers, Fog. You seemed like a smart guy. Fog. All alone in the woods.
Mm.
That's from my dream sequence. It's somebody else's dream.
Somebody else's dream, right? I love that.
Mm.
The way that you built that book around these dreams that you collected from others. It's quite innovative while being very relatable.
Yeah, well,
Not always easy.
they made such great poems.
Yeah.
The weird thing to me is that when I read those poems, I feel like they're my poems because I broke the lines and I redacted some things, I cut some things out. And I moved a little bit around and sometimes I added a little something. But I built the poems. I just didn't generate the initial language. And it's so weird
Right.
because I read them and they feel like poems I wrote, but
And
they're.
they sound like you,
And
which is also interesting,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when people would give them to you, they were fully written out and then you
And I shape
subtly,
them.
right, but you weren't doing major revisions on the language.
There are one or two poems where I did. Uh, uh, One poem I did probably 40% work, like I changed it
Right.
by 40%. And another poem I changed some significant words.
Right.
I did a replacement, but not meant just to sort of to create a new metaphor in it. And the
Right.
rest of them, the majority of, like, there's probably 15 of those in there. So the other
Mm-hmm.
dozen, I
Mm-hmm.
did very little. I took out a
Wow.
few things. Maybe I moved a line or two, but mostly they're verbatim.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it fascinates me. If you want to
Yeah.
write a book, poetry book, quickly, get other people to write it for you. The other book I have, I don't have a copy of it here. The other book I did really quickly was a photo shoot that I did in their concrete poems, and we did that in a
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
The,
I love that book.
the book I made in a day. Thanks. I love that book too.
Yeah. It's a wonderful sort of version of poems that I think is so great, especially for people who have a very kind of strict version or idea of what a poem is. It,
Right.
it can shift and alter that sense of certainty that a poem is rhyming iambic pentameter
Well,
about
that's
nature.
well, that's it. Like, poetry comes out of everywhere, right? That's the
Yeah,
magic, is that you really find art everywhere.
yeah. Yeah, and we all think and process through language, and so it's actually very accessible in that way for a lot of people. When I think historically it's been presented to us as fairly inaccessible, and this is the canon, and these are people who are educated and intelligent enough to understand this body of work. And if you don't get those poems, then you must not be a poet or understand. And it's like
Yeah, the
half these poems
gatekeeping.
are awful, you know?
Yeah. Oh,
Nobody likes that crap.
poetry gatekeeping is the worst.
It's its own thing. Okay,
Okay.
I have some interview questions. So this would be traditionally if we were on Inspired Word Cafe, where I would make a whole bunch of inappropriate sex jokes about how you're in my hotspot right now, and what's the temperature like for you, and are you comfortable, and I hope it isn't too moist or
Well, I can
damp.
tell that you haven't gotten out much during the whole pandemic because it's really furry in here. Like,
No, honey, it's always furry in there.
my spring trim. I actually noticed my pubes the other day. Speaking of saying anything, I noticed my pubes
Yeah,
the other day and I went, I am not ready for spring.
yeah,
I
no,
I
it's
need a little.
becoming bathing suit season, and it's a bush.
Yeah.
It's like everybody needs to get out their hedge clippers.
I love hair. I just have more than I know what to do with.
Yeah, I'm a hairy woman as well. I always joke that I have more armpit hair than any man I've ever seen in this world, and it's true. It's not a lie.
Next episode, armpit hair.
Okay, here we go, Michael. Some interview questions for you while you're in my hotspot.
Okay.
What was the first piece of writing you had published, if you can remember?
Yeah, that was a poem called A Poem by Peter McGehee, or McGee, but it spelled McGehee. Anyways, he
Mhm.
was this queer poet living in Toronto who passed away from HIV. And so I wrote a poem addressed to me, but
From him?
from him. I
Right.
wrote a whole play with
Oh,
he and I and my tongue, and it was a very weird university play, and they put it
right.
on, which was amazing. It was terrible play, terrible play. But I wrote a poem too, and I actually have a long poem in my first poetry collection that's addressed to Peter McGee. I was a little obsessed with him.
So did you know him?
No, I never met him. I went to a
Right.
launch of a collection of short stories that Jackie Burroughs, the big Canadian actress, she was reading
Mm-hmm.
at it, and a few other people. Sarah Sheard, she was my teacher in my undergrad in a creative writing
Right.
class. And I went to this reading, and the stories were queer and hysterical and amazing. And he had just died, and so they got all these famous people to read stories. And I was
Right.
just so struck by it. I
That's
just
amazing.
sort of I fell in love with him. I had a literary
Yeah.
crush.
Yeah.
And so I sent that poem out and it got published in the Church Wellesley Review, which was a
Amazing.
queer insert in Extra magazine in Toronto.
That's awesome. And so did you get paid for it?
I don't know if I got paid, but I remember being so over the fucking moon. There was a
I
really
bet.
famous bookstore in Toronto in St. Clair West area, I think, called Writers and Company, And I went into that bookstore to buy books. I would buy my poetry books there. And I remember walking up to the counter going, do I tell this person at the counter that I published a poem? Like, I'm a published writer too. Should I tell them? And so I did.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh, that's so great for you. And they gave me my things and said, have a nice day. And I was like, I'm a loser. But yeah, I was so happy. I felt like a whole new world had opened up to me
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that didn't feel accessible or available.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And it is. I think it feels that way for a lot of people. So I think it can be quite a pivotal moment. Okay. What made you decide you wanted to be a writer?
I wasn't pretty enough for the screen.
Right.
Pretty enough
So
for
what,
YouTube. I always wanted to be a writer. Like when I was in I think it was grade 4 or 5, Chantal Thierret had created. We were given the project where we could write a story and then produce it and make it into a little book. And so I tried to write a story, and I didn't really finish it. And I was writing about this guy I had a crush on, and but I was young. I didn't know I had a crush on him, but I did. And Chantal Thierret finished the story, printed it off, bound it in a little book, and brought it to class. And the teacher showed everybody this little book that Chantal had made. And I was like, who the fuck's she? What's she know about writing? I'm the writer. And I was like such a kid. And I was writing poems in grade 7,
wow.
to girls that I had crushes on. And
Yeah.
I wrote all through high school too.
Wow.
I don't know why. I just always wanted to be. I love books. Books saved me, right? I was a lonely kid with an alcoholic father and a freaked out mother, and we were pretty poor, and I was such a sissy in a rough neighborhood. I was
Yeah.
so fucking suicidal and lonely. When I
Right.
was in grade 5, I remember I would lay in my bed and dream, like sort of imagine myself jumping in front of semis as they passed on the road out front, or jumping out my second story window head first to see if that would kill. I had all these scenarios of how I would kill myself.
Yeah.
And books saved me. I read
Yeah.
books, and they were my friends and my company and my educators and my parents. Books
Right.
taught me how to be a better, safer person.
That's awesome. And then I just turned quickly to writing. So writing writing came for you before making film or
Oh yeah.
performing? Yeah.
Yeah. I was so paranoid. I was very self-conscious. So I had a really
Right.
hard time. I was such a shy kid. Like I really wanted to be in theater, and I auditioned for the grade 9 play, and I got a part, and then I dropped out because I
Oh,
just couldn't handle being seen
yeah.
by people.
Scene. Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
ended up doing plays later in grade 11, 12, 13. I had the lead once in one of the plays.
And then that kind of spurred you into, because you're so natural on stage.
I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I've always been very good at talking, because that's how I kept myself safe. That's how I kept people
Right.
from beating me up. I talked them out. I'd humiliate them out of beating me up.
Right.
And I used to walk into a room. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but I would walk into a room and I would scan the room and just notice everybody and figure out what their weaknesses were,
Weakness.
what they
Yeah.
wanted, how to, who was friends with who, what didn't they like, what did they like. And then I would manipulate people
Right.
to not beat me up and to be my
Right.
friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
So books saved me.
Yeah. And they made you into the man we see today.
Yeah.
I think that's always pretty incredible, and also seems to be a big part of a lot of writers' journey. I like to ask kind of these like origin stories with writers, and it's very rare to encounter somebody who doesn't just enjoy reading, but actually has this deep, loving connection with books, reading. And then, of course, these select books that we carry with us for our whole lives that are monumental, you know. I was always very much that way as well. And I wasn't very socially awkward, but I grew up in a family that was completely male dominated, and everything was about sports and
Right.
activities and physicality, and I never had a single competitive bone in my body and didn't want to. I'm very physically adept, but man, I hate sports. I really hate sports. And so for me, it was like this was the one thing that I could escape. I could be in the same space as all the rest of them while not having to be in the same space as all the rest of them.
Right.
So books served a kind of similar sort of purpose. But my mother also has this like deep love of reading. And I think that if she hadn't grown up in a very poor, tough neighborhood in Glasgow, Scotland, she maybe would have gone on to be a really wonderful writer herself. Because, man, Michael, she is
She's
a
got stories.
phenomenal storyteller. Like her little Scottish accent, and she throws in slang all the time, and they're just hysterical. And yeah, she's my idol. Okay, tell us the most embarrassing story from your childhood.
Oh, God. Embarrassing story.
Embarrassed.
Well, the most embarrassed I ever was. This is a hard story, man. I'm going to tell it briefly because I don't want to hurt anybody. But my dad was a terrible alcoholic. He would sometimes come home on Thursdays, which were payday, and he had bought rounds for everybody at the bar when he was drunk, and he'd have
Right.
no paycheck left.
Oh,
And we didn't have a lot of money, so that was a big deal. Or he'd come
yeah.
home, somebody drop him off because he rolled the car. I guess he rolled quite
Oh,
a few cars when we were really young. They were totaled. I
wow.
remember having a few different cars, but I didn't know what had happened.
Why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's because he rolled them. Anyways, and my mom was very tense and high strung, and she would just freak out on us randomly.
Right.
And one day these two kids had moved into the neighborhood, the Laframboise boys, Eric and Leaf. And Eric was in my grade and Leaf was a year younger, I think. And their dad drove a Jeep and he was stacked with muscle and he had one of those sort of pig,
Yeah.
fat pig noses. He was just like, ah, he was a dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like little mini versions of him, but they hadn't filled out yet, but they would. And they were both really good at math. And I remember Eric not being very nice to me and picking on me, but Todd threatened him. And somehow Eric decided to switch and he was going to be my friend. Maybe because Todd threatened him, I don't know.
Hmm.
But Eric came to pick me up one day and he knocked at the front door. Nobody used the front door. He knocked at the front door and my mom answered the door and yelled at me from the door. Why is your friend here? What the fuck are you doing with a friend coming to pick you up? You're not ready. I'm not ready. I don't have your lunch ready. You can't leave now. Tell your friends they're not allowed to come over here in the morning when I'm trying to get you ready for school. Francis says you should do impersonations of your mother from when you were young because they're really funny. I should be yelling it. My mom, I love my mom and we have a great relationship. And when I was young, she would just freak out
Yeah.
because like
She had a lot
she
going
had a
on.
lot going on.
Yeah.
So I hold that story with a great deal of compassion. But at
Yeah.
the time, I was in grade 5, so I was 12. No, I was
Yeah.
10.
11-ish.
10.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was so humiliated by that because
Yeah.
now that guy knew that my mom yelled at me like that. And I didn't know that parents yelled at each other, right?
Right.
I didn't know that people, got angry and talked. Because you just see what you see on TV. And I didn't have
Yeah.
any friends, right? We established that already. So I was just mortified by this. And I thought, okay, that's the end. So I had to go to the door and tell him, you can't come pick me up in the morning anymore. I'm sorry. Close the door.
Oh.
That's probably the most embarrassed I ever was. Or it was the time that I shat myself at the Woolco and a turd fell down my pant leg and onto the floor when I was 4. And my mom made me pick it up and tuck it into my sock. And then and then she drove us home. And I wasn't allowed to sit on the seat. I had to lean against the back of the seat. I couldn't put my bum down because I had more poo in my pants. Only one turd fell. I had other turds stored away. And then we had to clean it all up when we got home. But I was so young. Who even finds that embarrassing?
Well, I don't think you have. I don't think you suffer the same way. Like I noticed that with my children. Lennon is now at the point where she can become embarrassed at 9.5, and Mackenzie's only just getting there at 7. But before that, it was like they didn't. You could say fucking anything, and they'd be like, "Whatever, shitting's hilarious," you know.
Look, I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. I would be the one who was mortified and embarrassed in public places, but rarely them. Now I am their source of embarrassment in lots of ways. I think I was telling you the other day that I wanted to learn a TikTok dance to be on Lennon's TikTok, and she won't let me. She told me that I had to make my own TikTok account. And her TikTok name is Rich Lemons. I don't know. And she said, your name can be Mom of Rich Lemons. I was like, I'm not defined by being your mother. I hope you know that Mom of
Rich Lemons. Oh, God, I want to remember that. Let's write that down later. Can I speak with Mom of Rich Lemons, please?
You can go back and edit all our shows and put that up as my name.
Okay, am I off the hot seat now?
You have one last one, which I'm sure that I have probably already asked you this one because I ask everybody who sits in my hot spot.
I'm going to give you a 5-word answer.
It only has to be one.
Oh.
Even better. If you could be any fruit, what fruit would you be?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was a kumquat, just because it sounds funny. But probably a banana. Bananas are my favorite.
Are they?
Oh.
You bananas? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, bananas. They're so delicious. Bananas on ice cream. I eat ice cream sometimes at night just because there's bananas there. I'm like, oh, I want a banana. But let's put ice cream with it.
Okay, have you made banana ice cream, though?
No.
So it's so easy. If you have a food processor, you cut up some banana, you freeze it, and then you blend it with just a little bit of milk, and it quite literally makes banana ice cream. And it's so good. You can add chocolate chips and other sweetness.
Ooh, I'll try that.
You do that to trick the children into thinking they're eating ice cream, but really they're eating bananas.
You're so sly.
Well, that's it for Erin's Hotspot today. Thank you so much, Michael, for being a wonderful guest and sharing so many lovely, deep stories with us.
Well, I'm sorry that I talk so much because this is a long episode, but whatever.
I think it was a very compelling, beautiful episode, so don't you ever apologize.
Thanks for hosting me in your hotspot, Erin.
Thanks to you, Michael.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Talk to you soon. Bye.